Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Tuesday, the 28th of March. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning, the first time this week, by Joshua Barrie. How are we doing, Joshua?
Yeah, good, Derek. It's been I feel like it's been ages, but yeah, good to be back. We have been talking, of course, behind the scenes, so this isn't the first time we spoke to one another in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to have you back on. And before we talk all things Rangers, folks, as you know the drill by now, first of all, a quick word for our sponsors, Seneca Hair Restoration. If you're looking to maybe restore some lost self-confidence and looking for a hair transplant, perhaps, then these are the guys to go to, the number one hair transplant corporation in Europe, no less. And as always, I've brought the links to their social media accounts and their website in the description box. So do go check them out if that is something that you are thinking of. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, almost 12,000 of you now doing so. So thank you very much to each and every one of you. Just hit that subscribe button and click the bell. You'll never miss a video when we go live. And if you want to take advantage of the website, we've got an offer on just now, just £1 for 3 months worth of exclusive content. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. Just £2.99 per month thereafter. Even at that, it's an absolute bargain with the content you get on there. So do go check it out. Right, Joshua, a few little things to discuss today on the show. You can see in the title, folks, put in what is Rangers' strongest team, with one eye, of course, on next month, and huge matches ahead of Rangers, namely Old Firm matches against Celtic. We'll touch on that shortly. Before that, just a bit of news that broke yesterday. Fashion Sakala, of course, away on international duty with Zambia. He did well, of course. We all seen a brilliant goal he scored against Lesotho. He also set up another one. But he said he was targeted by brutal abuse during the second match. He posted on his Instagram saying, being called for national team games has and will always be an honour to me. However, this time it's been very difficult and by far the worst experience of my entire career. Over the years, I've endured the pain of being insulted endlessly by these Zambian fans for my style of playing game after game. The game we had in South Africa on the 26th of March 2023 was no different, as I was brutally insulted, being called selfish, etc. by Zambian fans at the stadium before the game started. I am a winger. I am highly trained to dribble, cause threats to opponents, and have as many touches as it profits the team to have more chances. And I believe that's why I've been playing successfully in Europe for 7 years. I have no doubt that my performances in Europe contribute immensely in the decisions that grant me being called up for the national team games and to add value to the squad. I am very disappointed in the Zambian fans for the vicious insults and endlessly booing directed to me when I have done nothing but show hard work, sacrifice, dedication and commitment to win games for my country. I appreciate the support I'm receiving from my family, national team coach, the entire management, my teammates and all the fans that have shown me love and support. I will continue to wear my national team jersey with pride because Zambia represent unity. This was a bit of a surprise reading this, Joshua. Fashion Sakala, much loved at Rangers. He's done, we'll touch on his improvement under Michael Beale as well. I think the change in manager has done him the world of good. He's one of the top dogs for Zambia, one of the top players. I found this rather surprising and a bit saddening as well to hear this.
Yeah, obviously we don't really have the context of much knowledge of the Zambian national team. I know Sakala, haven't watched a little bit, a couple of highlights just off the back of that. You saw, I think, with his goal, Derek, the other day, where he takes the ball off the left wing, beats two players and shoots and scores. And obviously, if you're going to be double marked in games and you're going to lose the ball a lot, I think more generally, his style, what you're seeing now at Rangers, I did an article last week, Derek, and I'm trying to find the exact numbers in front of me, but I think the numbers were something like 9 goal involvements in 8 games away from home. I think especially on the road, Sakala in this system, you got to remember he was recruited kind of for this system. If you think back to the end of the 2020-21 season, the last title-winning season, when Roof and Morelos were playing up front together, I think Sakala and Itten were both signed to try and transition that forward. I know it didn't work with Itten, even though he's scoring a lot of goals now in Switzerland, but they were designed, I think, and signed to give you different profiles of players. And now I think it's taken him a year and a half and that kind of style of play returning to show his best form. But what he does give you, I think, alongside his goals, Derek, is a lot of actual creativity away from home. If you think of his cutback for the third goal of the game against Motherwell, against Hibs, against Hearts, Kilmarnock, he's got assists in all these games away from home, and his expected assist stats, which is just a metric similar to expected goals, that shows how directly creative a player is being, goes from 0.04 per game at home to 0.37, which I think is kind of shows what confirms what the eyes see, Derek, that when he's got that space down the side of a defence, especially if they're trying to push up and be aggressive at home, he's such a productive player away from home for Rangers. And if you put that into the fact that he's also going to get you quite a few goals in there, because I think he has that natural goal scoring knack, then it does make you one of your most important players away from home. I think the question for Beale going into these games now, he's got to play Tillman and Cantwell. I think most people would agree on that. He's got to play Raskin. I don't think it's going to be a Tillman, Cantwell and Raskin midfield. So does he opt to kind of keep Sakala in there? Does he only play him away from home? It's a good problem to have, but I do think that probably not all those 5 or 4 players can play, and that's probably what the manager, I'm sure, will be mulling over with the international break as much as anything else.
Yeah, we'll touch on that team. A few comments coming in here. First of all, Maka says, morning guys, great article on Cantwell Joshua. If the 5 summer signings show the same application and attitude as Raskin and him, we'll be fine. Yeah, Michael Beale did touch on that, of course, at the tail end of last week. He did mention 5. He obviously says that the Rangers team will look much different at the start of next season. 5 summer signings, Joshua. It could well be more than that if players depart that perhaps we're not expecting as well. But a summer of change is on the way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think when Beale's speaking about that number 5, he's speaking within the context of 5 signings, hopefully like Raskin and Cantwell. And now, if you think, Derek, how much they've kind of re-energized things, you'd hope that if you more than double that number, then you'll be off to a good footing. Because you've got to remember, let's think you're taking, say Ryan Kent stays, you've got Raskin obviously there, you've got Cantwell, let's say Tillman stays. If you're adding 5 onto that, and you consider a Yilmaz or a Tavernier, a Goldson, you're already speaking about a completely new looking starting 11, and that's before you discuss other players that are in contract in the summer, that like a Lundstrom or a Barisic. Our piece this morning by Stevie Clifford kind of addresses this and looks at it in a little bit more detail. I'd be surprised if it wasn't a few more than that, because I think you've got to look at the number of out of contract players that are going to be leaving as well. But you've also got to remember, Derek, that Rangers have carried injuries so obviously this season, and that's impacted the kind of weight of their squad. And Beale's spoken about that before, the fact that the squad, I think that he's spoken about the squad being a bit bloated. If you look at the numbers of players who haven't played that much football, if it's 5 players, as Stevie said in this piece this morning, like Cantwell and Raskin, who can bring all their talent, but also the personality to adapt to Rangers, arriving at the right time in their career, where obviously for different stages for both of them, Raskin's still kind of on that first trajectory, and Cantwell's trying to get back to that. If you can get 5 more players like that, then I think you'd be in a pretty good footing.
Yeah, lots of questions coming in. Crypto Knight says, will we be signing a keeper in that 5? I would assume so. I think he's
it has to be, doesn't it? It has to be.
And a first-team goalkeeper, someone that's able to go in and take over the gloves from Alan McGregor, who we assume will be stepping aside in the summer, although he's given no indication as to whether that is going to be the case. But Rangers need to bring in another goalkeeper. It has to be one of, if it is 5 signings, then a goalkeeper has to be one of them. Angus Gunwood was linked last week, Joshua. I'm not too sure if you've seen much of him. Of course, he played for Scotland the other day. Would you be opposed to see him pitch up at Ibrox?
I've not seen much, just obviously that game. If you're going to sign a player, obviously he's at a good level, and I think that's why there was a lot of excitement about him going to play for the national team, because Scotland didn't really have a player to step into that position. Otherwise, Rangers obviously haven't invested in that goalkeeping position since McGregor got back. We know the Robbie McCrory kind of dilemma that's rumbled on the background for 2 years. Obviously, he kind of got injured at the wrong time when Beale came back into the club as well. But yeah, it's has to be an area of the pitch that Rangers invest in the summer. I think even if you look at the numbers this season and last season compared to the season before, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you're looking at 5 starters, I think you're going to have another centre-back in there probably to give some variation, but also a little bit more depth. Definitely a number 9, because we know Beale's spoken about that. If you retain Tillman, I don't know how many more creative players you need in there. Maybe one more with a different profile, but obviously Beale doesn't tend to use wingers. Probably another centre midfielder as well. I can't remember if that's 4 or 5 I've used. But as I say, once you consider Tillman, Cantwell, Raskin, Tavernier, Yilmaz, there is a strong base there alongside others like Ryan Jack if he stays as well. I know he's out of contract in the summer. But yeah, I'd go for that kind of 4 or 5 generally. And Beale said that, I think, going back to maybe the press conference after the first Old Firm game. There's been a lot of press conferences, but I'm sure he's kind of confirmed that as well.
Yeah, right, let's get a few more comments coming in. One on fashion, actually. I like this comment. It's coming in here on Facebook. We love fashion, Sakala, as Zambians here. It's just a bunch of supporters who never appreciate his attributes to the national team. Playing as a team is important. That's that individual. And otherwise, lastly, he's one of our dependable players as well. So that's a nice comment in support of fashion, Sakala. I really appreciate that, folks. We like a bit of a laugh here on the morning. CGM 55, an absolute disaster of a morning for him. He says, it's going to be a long day. I am sitting at my desk and have already munched my lunch.
Wow.
So a disaster time there. And Matt Gunner off on the back of that. Where is the best munchy place in Clydebank, folks? So if you can help Matt out, anybody that knows any good places to eat in Clydebank, then please pop it in the description box, folks. Right, let's get back to the football. Interesting point raised coming in. Paul McTaggart says, just touching on the 5 potential incomings in the summer, you'd think a goalkeeper and a striker, regardless of what happens with Morelos, there'll be priorities amongst the 5. In nearly July says, goalie, centre-half, centre-mid, wide player, and a striker. I know they are looking at centre halves. Rangers, Michael Beale has touched on that as well, especially if he's going to go to a back 3 in the future as well. And this is an interesting point as well. It's come in from Jack Joyce. Joshua says, morning guys, how do you think Beale could get Cantwell, Raskin, Tillman, Sakala and Kent in the same starting 11? This ties in, of course, with the big matches coming up. Would you want to play all of them in the same team? Could Rangers do that? Could accommodate them all?
Well, it's a wider conversation, Derek, about playing with 2 holding midfielders or controlling midfielders. You go back to the Ross County game, the 2-1 win, start of February, I think, maybe end of January. And Beale, if you watch his press conference after that, he speaks about the importance of balance, the importance of the overall team, and how Rangers were a bit unbalanced when they were playing with, I think it was Sakala, Morelos, Kent, Tillman and Cantwell on that day. Now, Cantwell was maybe playing a little bit higher. I guess it was at home than we've seen him at other points. But we know that Beale's going to play with, I think if he has everyone fit, and presuming that Raskin's fit coming back out of this international break, if you take his back 4 out of the equation, although I guess the introduction of Yilmaz can change things somewhat, we know it's going to be a Jack or a Lundstrom as the number 6. It just is, if you're playing with 2 high fullbacks, I think most managers want kind of 4 players behind the ball. So we know it's going to be one of them with Nico Raskin. I think obviously we've seen Raskin and Kamara a little bit earlier in the season. If you go back to the Motherwell game, obviously we don't know how fit Tillman was, but I think if he was going to play in a midfield 3 going forward with maybe Cantwell and Jack or Raskin, then we'd have seen him start on that day. So it does really leave 4 spaces. Ryan Kent's always going to play. We discussed this a lot, and we've written a lot of articles over the last couple of weeks about about Cantwell and Tillman, who's better suited to pushing up a line, and we obviously seen Tillman do that away at Motherwell. I think he's best suited to that, Derek, but I also think you can't really lose Sakala's pace in transition away from home. But the Old Firm game is a difficult kind of medium between that, because Sakala, I don't think he had a great game at all. I think he had a bad game in the cup final. And I think areas where you'd expect him to do better compared to the previous Old Firm games kind of let Rangers down a bit on that day. Tillman, his technical quality obviously doesn't come into question. I think especially at home, playing him with a little bit more freedom higher up the pitch could be an idea, because I think it makes more sense to move him up a line than it does Cantwell. So I think it will be somewhat of a kind of rotational move. And I know Tillman hasn't had a good Old Firm game yet, but when you're going to Hampden, presuming he's still in good form going into that game, or obviously Celtic Park in a couple of weeks, you have to think, do you want him on the bench, or do you want him starting? Maybe Beale will go with a Cantwell, Raskin and Jack midfield, and then start Sakala on the front line. As I say, I think Sakala away from home can be so effective for Rangers, but I don't think you can just chuck them all in there and upset the balance, because if you do that, then, as we've seen against Ross County, but I think more so the fact that you've seen Beale start with those two midfielders every game is an indication of why they're important to the team and just the kind of overall balance. So difficult one to have there, but I think a good problem to have as well, because that's something that Beale's reiterated continually since he's come in, is the importance of kind of putting up the pressure in the building by increasing the competition. But yeah, I'd be surprised if Tillman wasn't playing a little bit higher, just because of how well Campbell started in that kind of role. And speaking to his youth team coach at Norwich, a piece is out on the website yesterday, that's where he kind of always seemed to play his best football as a young player. Coming to Rangers, and Beale's again referenced this, a lot of people thought he'd be an attacking player, but he's turned out to be more of a connector, someone who connects the midfield and the attack. We all know about his off-ball work. I think only Tillman has kind of higher pressure numbers than him, and tackles and interception numbers than Cantwell. I think it makes more sense to move Tillman up a line than him, and Cantwell, I think, in that kind of dictating midfield roles, shown a really good face so far.
Yeah. Nicola gets in touch. He says, morning, guys. I'm hitting the like button, but it's not showing up anyone else having that problem. It's not appearing on my screen, Nicola. I think it might be a technical issue with the video this morning, but thank you anyway. If keep trying, it might pop up at some point, but I think it's an issue with our video host this morning. Just touching on the midfield, a lot of comments coming in about potential departures. RFC 56 says, are we giving Lundstram another contract, or selling or letting him run it down? And just on the back of that, Colin Williams gets in touch. I'd sell Kamara, Lundstram, and with Davis going, we need 3 centre mids. It's an interesting point. I think Ryan Jack's contract is up in the summer as well. I think it's a given. Rangers will offer him a new deal. I think that's the right way to go. Perhaps a year extension. Joshua, we all know he's had his injury problems, but I think he's a good player to have around the place. And when he's on his game, as we've seen at Easter Road recently, I don't think there's any midfielder in Scotland that can touch him when he's on top form. However, these 3 players, Davis, of course, has been out injured. Whether he comes back and appears in a Rangers jersey again remains to be seen. I would say it's highly unlikely. John Lundstram's had a poor season, and Glenn Kamara likewise. Do you see all 3 going in the summer?
Yeah, I think you look at them in isolation. Obviously, Davis, Beale's kind of been reluctant to say that he's going to retire, and you can understand when someone that's had the career like Stephen Davis has had. Obviously, you kind of, I guess, want to just afford them the decision themselves. That said, I'd be surprised if he's playing for Rangers next season in any capacity. We know that Beale thought he still had a lot left in his legs, especially with the 5 sub rule coming back up the road before that really misfortunate injury. Kamara, I think he's reached a stage where he's 27. Rangers have that contract for, I want to say 2 more years. I want to say it's still 2025. He's not going to, I think, return the type of money that he would have at one point, but he's still an international player with a lot of experience, who has a lot of quality, and I think probably needs a move. He did improve under Beale for a number of games. Obviously, I think Tynecastle away was really good as well, but you just need to, at times, move on and sign new players and refresh the squad. I think that's probably applicable to him, and maybe he needs that move as well. Lundstram's a really interesting one, because you're right, he's entering the final year of his deal. I always think he signed a 4-year contract, but it was a 3-year contract. You compare it to this time last season, Derek, when he was, he was quite literally a lot of people's favourite player. If you spoke to a lot of people in Europe, he was Rangers' most important player at points. Never forget that game after Leipzig, when his song was being played and he was walking around, and you were thinking, you can't get higher than this for a player in their career. But he's had a difficult few months. I don't think there's any escaping that. I think he's actually had a difficult season. I mean, I remember going back to the game, watching the game in Ajax, and thinking then how different he looked to the season before. There's probably a lot of context around that. He'll probably feel like he's not being able to show his best form. I don't think Lundstrom's a player who is in the same way that maybe a Raskin or even a Jack will kind of dictate the game when you're trying to open a defence. But equally, I'm sure Beale would look at it and look at his best performances and what he can give you in these end-to-end games and what he can give you in different aspects of games and say that could be costly to replace. So I think that's one that will be really intriguing to look at between now and the end of the season, because as I say, it's tended to be one of him or Ryan Jack always in that side, kind of in front of the defence, with Raskin a little bit higher. You presume that's the same going forward, but yeah, definitely centre midfield is going to be an area that Rangers need to invest in. We've already started that strongly, obviously, with Nico Raskin, and hopefully he's back quickly after the international break.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that's not a serious injury for him. I think it was a quad issue, Michael Beale said, that kept him out of the Motherwell game, and then, of course, the 2 Belgium under-21 matches. The Blue Yonder says, no mention of Lawrence. He will be vital. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, he's another one that's been out long-term injured. And the thing is with him, it was a bit of a blow to hear that he's going to be back at the tail end of pre-season, Joshua. So he'll be playing catch-up with the rest of the team, which is unfortunate. Just really unlucky, the lad, in terms of getting injured earlier on in the season. The back end of August, wasn't it? And we've not seen him since, which is extremely unfortunate. It ties in with that Rangers season pretty much. It's been, especially first half, very depressing in terms of injuries that have plagued the squad and affected results on the pitch as well. Interesting point that's been raised here by Ross. He says, we've seen a lot of the top teams playing with this box midfield now. I wonder if this is what Beale is pushing for, with Tillman playing higher up the park and Cantwell playing deeper. Do you think he's got a point there, Joshua?
Yeah, good point. We actually also, I think you've seen Gio do it in Europe as well, especially that PSV away game when it was Lawrence, Tillman, Kamara and Lundstrom, I want to say, off the top of my head. Yeah, I think so, yeah, because obviously Rangers, the width's normally going to come from the fullbacks, a little bit more flexibility on the right. And I think with Ridvan coming in, you'll see a bit more flexibility on the left as well. But Beale's whole kind of philosophy is about getting players playing close together in important areas of the pitch. Nothing epitomises that more than Ryan Kent's, I think, impact in the last few games. I put a piece out last week, Derek, that was kind of saying, you look at that Motherwell game where Kent leaves a pitch without a goal or an assist, and it's the same as the Hibs game, and some people would use that as a stick to beat him with, where I just think he's misprofiled a lot of the time, Kent. I don't think he's nearly a good enough finisher, and definitely at times his decision-making, easy for me to say, has held him back. But I think he plays such an important role and kind of a different role to the one that gets kind of held over him at points. Watch that third and fourth goal, and it's all about him, his movement in the middle of the pitch, the fact that Motherwell can't really man mark him. And it was the same at Hibs away, I think, where he's able to make a real impact. Obviously, then he wins the penalty, he plays a pass that Sakala sets up Čolak for the fourth goal, but again, he leaves the game without any goals or assists. All that to say, I think in that kind of box midfield style where he's got freedom, you're going to see his best football, hopefully, going forward if he does stay. And it suits players like Tillman and Cantwell playing close together rather than isolated out on other sides of the pitch. I think works really well. So I think Ross is absolutely right. It's just about, as we've mentioned, how you match that up with, if you're going to play, say, Tillman, Cantwell and Kent, Raskin and Jack, do you have a number 9 who's going to be prolific enough in this squad to accommodate their maybe lack of goals? I know Tillman's going to score a lot of goals as well. I don't know if Morelos is at home. Čolak, I think, probably maybe works better in a 2. We've not really seen him as a number 1 yet, just playing on his own, kind of with his back to goal. We've seen him playing up top with Sakala. I increasingly think that that's the type of profile of player that Beale wants up top, a striker that he's going to be able to play in kind of any type of game. Just need to see, obviously, what happens with Morelos after the international break, because going back to those comments before the international break, they were really, really interesting, and he looked sharp when he came off the bench against Motherwell.
Yeah, let's get to a couple more points before we wrap up. Kev Armstrong says, Rabbi Matondo, sell or keep? For me, it's not happened for him at Rangers, Joshua. I would be, if Rangers can find a buyer for him in the summer, if he doesn't get a look in from here until the end of the season and impress, then I'd be looking for a potential avenue out of Ibrox for him. It's not quite happened for him, has it? And Michael Beale's come in. I know he had a little niggling injury of late. He was back on the bench recently. I can't remember who it was against, but he was back on the bench. Yes. I'm not entirely sure.
Kilmarnock, maybe? Was it Kilmarnock?
Maybe. If you can let us know in the comments, folks. But I would sell in the summer if the situation is the same as it is now, Joshua.
Yeah, we've not seen him in this system. It would be interesting. I think it was the first pre-season game against Bayer Leverkusen. We've seen him kind of playing up top in that split striker role. Matondo's an intriguing type of player because obviously he's earned a lot of big moves at the age. He's still only 22 or 23 and has struggled to replicate that so far. But we've also not seen him play under Beale. Be right, whether he gets the opportunity to do that, whether Beale thinks he's a type of player that can fit in under him. What you would say is you've seen players turn it around before. I mean, remember Sakala at the start of the season was completely a forgotten man. And you look at his impact now, and I'm not saying Matondo's going to come in and make that impact, but I think you're spot on. If we see him between now and the end of the season, maybe Beale does have a plan for him. If not, maybe he is a player that would suit a different style of system. And although it didn't work under Gio playing on that right side, and maybe he needs to go somewhere where he's going to play a lot of football. Because obviously it was a great season in Belgium last year as well. I know it's a more open league, but it's not as if it's a low quality league compared to Scotland. And he's has only just kind of got back fit in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so. I think after that mess away at Ross County, where you could just see he went through one-on-one and you could just see it was a player playing with so little confidence. See, I'm sure something that will be brought up soon at a press conference, and interesting to see, as you say, if he does get any minutes between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that in Belgium. I remember back, it seems like a lifetime ago now, when Rangers played at Union Saint-Gilloise, who incidentally are tearing it up in the Europa League. They're doing really well. They're in the quarterfinals now of the Europa League?
Yeah, so, Union Berlin, I think.
Yeah, absolutely sensational. Mixed Rangers victory at Ibrox, all the more impressive, I guess. Not that it sweetens the blow of the European displays this season, but I spoke to their manager and one of I think it was the captain at the time prior to that game in Belgium. They said that Matondo was the best player in the division for the second half of the season when he was at Cercle Bruges. So, I think it has been a confidence issue with the lad, but it just hasn't happened for him at Ibrox. And before we wrap up, I'm aware that the tickets for the Scottish Cup semi-final have been released to fans. There's a few pointers, folks, as well, just to make you aware of. Of course, the Rangers website provider, which is a third-party provider, the maximum number of connections for ticket purchasers to avoid supporters queuing online, to the extent that Rangers can, albeit some queuing at midday, is inevitable. We're also told that the new ticketing site selected from the recent tender, which is called SeatGeek, remains in plan and will be available for next season when Rangers' existing contract ends with their current ticket provider. Supporters in Group 1 who meet the points criteria can access their ticket anytime until the deadline, and the reduced allocation of circa 500 is due to SFA allocating Rangers less tickets and it being a different competition to the League Cup, which is SPFL run. This explains the small difference in MyJer's points requirements. So that's just a bit of information on the Scottish Cup semi-final tickets. Of course, that match taking place at the end of April, the 30th of April, if I'm not mistaken. The Celtic Rangers game, isn't it? It's Sunday, the 30th. Yeah, Rangers play Celtic at Hampden. Just on that, Joshua, of course, it's the Inverness Falkirk game taking place on the Saturday. I think there's women's games taking place that weekend as well. Slight concerns over if the pitch is going to hold up?
I was going to say you hope the weather helps, but after a nice day in Glasgow yesterday, it is back to kind of expected levels of rain today. So it makes, that semi-final was the worst I can remember in quite a long time. So obviously you hope that it is better for that. If my memory serves me right, it was a bit better in the final, but probably still not of the level of you'd hope for.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, Derek, because you don't want that in a cup final. You want it to be like a carpet, which I think Ibrox has looked brilliant right throughout winter. I wasn't at the Legends game at the weekend, but it looked pretty good to me from the photos I saw.
Yeah, and hats off to the ground staff at Ibrox to do a cracking job there. The pitch in immaculate condition. Okay, folks, I think that'll do us there. Thank you to everyone for interacting with the show as ever. It's greatly appreciated. Just a reminder, if you want to take advantage of the website, then we've got an offer on just now. Just £1 for 3 months worth of content. It's well worth you signing up now to take advantage of all the great stuff on there. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. Just £2.99 per month thereafter. Even at that, it's a bargain. But yeah, now is the time to go over and sign up. It takes a few seconds and you can enjoy all the fantastic content on there. This morning, there's a piece from Stevie Clifford from the Four Lads Had a Dream blog on the recruitment reality. Michael Beale's Rangers revamp must follow. Joshua did a great interview with Todd Cantwell's former coach at Norwich City, which you can find on there. There's an interview with Craig Moore, all sorts on there to keep you amused and entertained. Okay, folks, that'll do us. We'll speak to you again tomorrow. Johnny is scheduled to come on with me, so we'll look forward to that. But until then, enjoy the rest of your